It was the sort of retirement facility that folks envisioned in their ideal dreams, featuring perfectly trimmed lawns, swaying rocking chairs positioned on the front porch, caregivers who spoke in soothing tones and possessed tender, caring hands. Relatives described it as a true gift from above, while the residents themselves referred to it as a state of serenity. Yet, serenity can be quite elusive, straightforward to imitate, but incredibly difficult to sustain over time. Consequently, when a therapeutic canine by the name of Max abruptly halted right in the middle of his stroll and released a profound, bone-rattling rumble directed toward the far end of a tranquil corridor, the deceptive appearance began to fracture ever so slightly. Max wasn't merely an ordinary canine. He was a former police K-9 unit member having served for 6 full years in law enforcement, participating in more than 50 successful operations, hailed as a champion on numerous occasions beyond what anyone could accurately tally. Nowadays, with fur turning silver around his snout and a bit of stiffness affecting his joints, Max dedicated his time to providing comfort to the senior residents at Rose Hill Retirement Home. He remained composed, affectionate, and entirely dependable until that particular Tuesday afternoon arrived. The day commenced much like any typical one, with rays of sunlight streaming generously through the high windows of room 208, where Miss Evelyn softly sang vintage jazz melodies to herself. Caregivers pushed their trolleys along the corridors, and the atmosphere carried a subtle aroma of porridge mixed with citrus-scented cleaner. Max, ever the loyal companion, trotted steadily alongside Sarah, a 26-year-old caregiver who had recently completed a challenging training period and was still adapting to the unique cadence of this oddly calm environment. "Come along, pal," Sarah remarked, giving his lead a soft pull as they proceeded beyond the western section, an antiquated portion of the structure that saw little activity in recent times. It was at that moment that Max came to a complete standstill. He didn't simply hesitate. He became utterly immobile, with his fur standing on end, his frame tense and unyielding, his gaze fixed intently upon a doorway located at the distant extremity of the corridor room 316. The entrance was aged and substantial, differing from the surrounding ones, with a dusty small sign dangling unevenly on its surface, though the inscription had been scraped away. Max emitted a rumble so subdued that it caused Sarah's insides to churn uncomfortably. "Hey, what's the matter?" she murmured, lowering herself next to him. He offered no reaction, not even a flick of his tail. His nostrils flared, detecting an odor that remained invisible to Sarah. Then he let out a single bark, intense, piercing, and insistent. Sarah had never witnessed him vocalize in such a manner before. A caregiver nearby extended her head from an adjacent room, appearing irritated. "Is everything all right over there?" Yes, apologies," Sarah responded hastily. "It's just Max acting strangely." The caregiver furrowed her brow. "Avoid lingering close to that entrance. It's secured for a specific purpose." Sarah acknowledged with a nod, pulled on Max's lead, and continued forward. Yet Max persistently glanced backward. That evening, Sarah found sleep elusive. She attempted to dismiss the incident. Canines vocalize, aged structures make creaking noises. Perhaps it was a rodent, an aroma, something harmless, but the image of Max positioned like a vigilant officer returning to active service replayed incessantly in her thoughts. She was scheduled for another late-night duty on Thursday. Max appeared uneasy right from their arrival. Typically, he would approach residents individually, presenting his head for a pat or delicately pushing a palm with his nose, but not on this occasion. He continuously tugged in the direction of the western section. Sarah was reluctant to acknowledge it, but a portion of her felt intrigued. Room 316 appeared on none of the layout diagrams she had examined, and upon inquiring with Mrs. Harrington, the evening overseer, the senior lady had responded decisively, "No need to concern yourself with it. Certain areas are simply too deteriorated." Too deteriorated? What exactly did that signify? By 1:30 in the morning, the corridors had fallen silent, with only the gentle whir of the cooling system and the sporadic signal from a cardiac device in the health area audible. Sarah escorted Max for one final circuit before retiring, and once more he pulled her toward that identical entrance. But this instance he refused to cease vocalizing 3 brief outbursts, a brief interval, followed by a prolonged wail. Sarah experienced a shiver traveling along her back. "Cease that, Max," she murmured, dropping to her knees beside him. "You're liable to rouse the entire place." But Max persisted undeterred. It was then that she observed it, the dimmest glow emanating from beneath the doorway's gap. Her pulse quickened. Number individuals were allocated to that section. No caregivers were stationed beyond room 310. And nevertheless, there was illumination subtle, wavering, resembling an overlooked lamp or a television tuned to interference. She extended her hand toward the knob secured, naturally. She stooped and gazed through the antique key slot, anticipating, perhaps, to perceive nothing whatsoever, but what met her eyes caused her to recoil. Abruptly, a silhouette traversed the space, sluggish, hauling an object. The form was roughly humanoid, but slumped, as if an element had fractured and failed to mend properly. Max snarled, exposing his fangs. Something occupied that space. Love real-life animal heroes? Support their stories by subscribing to our YouTube channel, Heroes for Animals, and never miss a new episode of Courage and Compassion. Sarah refrained from informing anyone the following daybreak, not immediately. She required comprehension of what she had witnessed, what Max had detected, but she commenced posing inquiries discreetly, nonchalantly. "Hey, do we utilize the western section for storage purposes or similar?" Mrs. Harrington's expression grew taut. "It's advisable to remain in your designated zones, dear." I believed I spotted illumination in one of those areas. The senior caregiver grinned, though it failed to extend to her gaze. Aged electrical systems. No cause for concern. Sarah assented, yet she began documenting observations. Subsequently, she examined the resident dossiers. Each space in the western section, from 311 through 320, was denoted as unoccupied or undergoing refurbishment. However, upon delving further into the establishment's digital records, she uncovered an anomaly. 3 distinct pharmaceutical shipments, all designated for chambers in that section. Yet no residents, no registrations, no identification codes, no admission documents, merely vacant entries within the database. An individual or entity was residing within that corridor. The subsequent Tuesday, she arrived ahead of schedule. Max was positioned near the entrance, already striding back and forth. Sarah carried a portable light source this occasion, along with an audio device concealed within her uniform. She was indifferent to potential termination. Around 2 o'clock in the morning, she revisited. The passage was hushed, the lunar glow scarcely illuminating the particles suspended in the atmosphere. Max proceeded gradually alongside her, his skull lowered, auricles quivering. The glow was present once more. This instance, she attempted an alternative approach. She lowered herself beside the entrance and murmured, "Greetings, is anybody inside?" No reply, yet the illumination wavered anew, and Max became rigid. Then, a noise, not a spoken word, not footfalls, respiration shallow, wheezing, and proximate. Sarah's pulse accelerated. She retreated gradually, Max positioning his form protectively in front of hers. Abruptly, the respiration ceased, complete stillness. She pivoted and departed, striving to maintain composure, but each follicle on her limbs stood erect. The ensuing morning, Sarah approached the establishment's administrator, Mr. Whitaker. He was a lofty gentleman with metallic locks and an aura of professional serenity, the variety of serenity that rendered one feel as though no matter was ever pressing, even when it truly was. She recounted the entirety, the vocalizations, the motion, the oscillating glow, the absent resident documentation. He attended, grinned, and stated, "You've been handling numerous evening duties, Sarah. Occasionally, the psyche deceives us." "I observed an individual," she persisted. "And Max, it's an antiquated structure," he interjected, replete with breezes and power fluctuations. "We value your attentiveness, but there's no issue." She exited the chamber more exasperated than previously. Max, nevertheless, was far from finished. Later that afternoon, as a repair technician traversed with the equipment trolley, Max surged forward, not to assault, but to seize an item. Sarah hurried over precisely in time to observe Max yanking a collection of keys from the gentleman's waistband. And as she retrieved them, she noticed one bore a minor corroded inscription. Sarah failed to rest following the conclusion of her duty. She remained in her vehicle for almost 60 minutes, clutching the assortment of keys that Max had procured as though they were a vital link. Her mind whirled. Why would a maintenance employee possess a key to a chamber purportedly barricaded? And why was it undocumented in the logs, but indicated on this key with a subtle, rusted label that stated 316? She glanced toward Max, coiled in the adjacent seat, emitting gentle snores. Even during repose, his auricles flickered at each noise. She couldn't articulate it, but the greater duration she spent alongside Max, the more she relied upon his perceptions over those of any human colleague. By the commencement of her subsequent evening duty, she had resolved her course. She was venturing back. The corridor leading to the western section was mute, the type of muteness that lacked tranquility. It was aberrant, as if auditory waves themselves declined entry. Sarah sensed the cold penetrating her core the instant she traversed the boundary. Max accompanied her once more, exceptionally vigilant, each footfall intentional. She grasped the key ring firmly, employing her portable light judiciously to evade detection. The majority of personnel were either absent or slumbering. It was the opportune moment or none at all. Upon arriving at room 316, Max halted and seated himself, not strained, not hostile, merely anticipating, as though he recognized this instance was inevitable. Sarah inhaled deeply, chose the appropriate key, and rotated it gradually within the mechanism. Click. The entrance emitted a faint creak as it yielded. The odor assaulted her initially stagnant, resembling aged perspiration and sanitizing agents that had failed to conceal the deterioration. Her portable light quivered in her grasp. She advanced inward. The chamber was more spacious than she had anticipated. It wasn't truly a resident's quarters. The wall covering was flaking, the flooring planks groaned, But what was conspicuous was that it was inhabited. There were 2 slender medical cots, both prepared, although one displayed a profound depression, as if an individual had reclined upon it for extended periods. An antiquated intravenous support stood adjacent to the partition. A television affixed elevated in the nook oscillated with interference. And on the opposite extremity, a gentleman in a mobility chair, motionless, oriented toward the barrier. Sarah's respiration faltered. "Sir," she uttered softly. No reaction. She progressed cautiously, pulse thumping. Max released a subdued rumble, remaining rearward near the entrance. She advanced further. The gentleman shifted. He didn't rotate, but he elevated one limb gradually, unsteadily, and gestured toward the bedside table next to him. Sarah squinted. She approached warily and unlatched the compartment. Within, she discovered a compact, hidebound journal, no title on the exterior, merely aged, frayed borders, and a fractured spine. The gentleman ultimately vocalized, his tone arid, as if unused for several days. "He believes no one recalls us." Sarah regarded him. His countenance was emaciated, his orbs recessed. He appeared 80, perhaps 90, yet there was an element vibrant in his stare, something acute. "Who are you?" she inquired. His lips scarcely shifted. "You already comprehend." She didn't, but the manner in which he expressed it sent a shiver through her. She opened the journal. The initial sheet proclaimed, "They were intended to be deceased." Sarah didn't seize the journal immediately. She sealed it, replaced it where discovered, and retreated gradually. Her senses urged that she had lingered excessively. As the entrance secured behind her, Max arose and pressed his form against her limbs, safeguarding, stabilizing. She didn't slumber upon returning home. Instead, she scoured every accessible repository, medical dossiers, antiquated staff lists, even archival news reports. Nothing surfaced regarding room 316, or the designation she eventually located inscribed on the interior rear cover of the journal, Harold J. Thompson. No dossiers, no crisis liaison, no resident identifier, no financial history. It was as though the individual in that chamber was non-existent. She attempted anew the following day, consulting a distinct caregiver, one employed only briefly. "Oh, that chamber," the caregiver responded. "They mentioned some former veteran resides there during family visits from distant locations. I've never observed him, though. Former veteran? Yes, or possibly a cleric. I'm uncertain. The narratives vary." Sarah ceased inquiries thereafter. Each response constituted a fresh falsehood. That weekend, Sarah convened with a longtime acquaintance, Jordan, who operated in medical adherence. She withheld certain details, disclosing merely sufficient. Could a caregiving establishment harbor unregistered residents? She posed over beverages. He arched an eyebrow. If they're concealing individuals, that's a significant crime: deception, mistreatment, unlawful detention. Why? Sarah paused, then stated, "Suppose an individual uncovers a resident lacking documentation, no financial dossier, no societal or identification. What would transpire?" He inclined forward. "You'd contact the authorities promptly." She assented, yet she didn't, not immediately, because an aspect of how Harold had directed toward that journal suggested there was additional. As if this transcended mere deception, it was more profound, more sinister. She needed to ascertain what they concealed. Sunday evening, Sarah revisited room 316. The key inserted more smoothly this occasion, as if the entrance anticipated her. Harald occupied the identical position. He didn't pivot upon her entry, but he articulated, "You returned." "I perused a portion," she remarked, elevating the journal. "It's difficult to accept. Then refrain from accepting. Observe." He gestured anew, this occasion toward a drape on the distant side of the chamber. Behind it, Sarah uncovered an entrance, a secondary entrance, metallic, substantial, resembling one encountered in a medical subterranean or a defense installation. It featured a biological identifier adjacent, not a card reader, a scanner. "What is this?" she murmured. Harold emitted a parched laugh. "That's where the remainder reside." Sarah gazed at the identifier. "No one else ever enters here," she uttered, partially to herself. "They cannot," he countered. "They lack the key." He inclined toward Max. Sarah blinked. Max, not the canine, the designation. It was a cipher once, prior to terminating the initiative. What initiative? He maneuvered his chair marginally, ultimately confronting her. The initiative they interred, just like us. She retreated a pace, pulse racing. What were they conducting here? Harold's gaze fixed upon hers, attempting to obliterate what they performed. Sarah departed that evening with the journal in possession. Within were designations, dates, some merely numerals, others struck through with crimson pigment. One was prominent, July 17, 2009. Subject 138 terminated. And below that, inscribed in unsteady, curving script, not terminated. Relocated room 317. Her eyes expanded. Room 317 adjoined Harold's. On every formal dossier, it was denoted as vacant. But that metallic entrance, the identifier, she wasn't merely confronting unrecorded residents. There were concealed chambers. The subsequent morning, Sarah arrived prematurely. She prepared beverages, grinned at fellow caregivers, feigned normalcy, but throughout, she observed. At 10:45 a.m., a gentleman in a tan outfit appeared. He bore no emblem, no medical instrument. He didn't register. Sarah observed him proceed quietly toward the western section and vanish into room 317. 10 minutes thereafter, he emerged, clutching a metallic valise. Sarah noted the side of his throat, a minor blemish, as if an implant had been inserted and subsequently extracted. He didn't resemble a physician. He resembled an individual who eradicated elements. Max rumbled from across the passage. Sarah didn't restrain him this occasion. Sarah couldn't cease contemplating the gentleman in the tan outfit. No identification, no notepad, no utterances exchanged, just entry and exit. Pristine, hushed, rehearsed, and the metallic valise. She couldn't dispel the vision. It was incongruous in a retirement facility. It pertained to a governmental establishment or a film where individuals vanished without inquiry. Max hadn't averted his gaze from that passage the whole day. He declined sustenance. He declined repose, just remained like a monument, eyes fastened on room 317. That evening, Sarah rendered a choice she never anticipated. She registered departure, but remained concealed. She awaited behind the storage racks in the laundering area, the sole location devoid of surveillance devices. She could perceive the drone of apparatuses and the intermittent squeal of a mobile trolley as nocturnal personnel navigated. Midnight arrived and departed. 1 a.m. ensued. Then she detected it. Footfalls, subdued, uniform, not a caregiver's, not in those footwear. She peered through the aperture in the entrance precisely in time to witness him anew, the gentleman in the tan outfit. Advancing down the western section, identical procedure, valise and grasp. He employed an item on his arm, a shadowy band, perhaps a biological detector, and accessed room 317 soundlessly. Sarah tallied each moment. 5 minutes, 10, 15. At minute 20, the entrance yielded. The gentleman departed, now empty-handed, vanished. Sarah lingered 10 additional minutes prior to relocating. Room 317 differed from 316, tidier, chillier. The overhead illumination was stark, antiseptic pale. There was solely one cot, one seat, and affixed to the cot with dense hide restraints at the lower limbs and upper limbs was a female pallid complexion, cropped scalp, slender, alarmingly so, but vital. She was conscious, gazing directly at the overhead, not fluttering her lids, not responding. Sarah hastened to her flank. "Hey, can you perceive me?" The female's lips quivered slightly, but it was an indication. "I'm Sarah," she murmured, glancing toward the entrance. "I'm a caregiver here. What's your designation?" A hesitation. Then the female murmured something so faint Sarah had to incline closely to discern it. Subject 13. Sarah's pulse ceased. That S what the journal had indicated. Subject 13, A terminated, but this female, she was present, vital. Sarah extended toward the bindings. Max vocalized once acute and subdued. Footfalls. Someone approached. Sarah became immobile. Her palms lingered over the hide straps. Then she withdrew into the compact provision alcove in the nook of the chamber, scarcely sufficient to accommodate her and Max. She deactivated her portable light and restrained her respiration. The entrance opened. 2 individuals entered, not the gentleman in the tan outfit this occasion. These were attendants, expressionless, vacant, maneuvering like automatons. They refrained from speech. One modified the intravenous conduit, the other inspected the display. "She's steady," one of them uttered indistinctly, barely. "No more than 48 hours. The other assented. "Let her repose." Then they departed. Sarah lingered 5 minutes, then 10. When certain they had gone, she surfaced and hastened to the cot. "Hold on," she murmured. "I'm returning for you." That morning she contacted Jordan. "All right," he remarked over the line, tone strained. "Let's assume you discovered a concealed resident. You're certain she's not documented anywhere?" "She's not," Sarah countered. "She lacks a dossier. There's a metallic entrance linking from 316. There's something subterranean." Jordan fell silent momentarily. "Then you must depart." "I cannot." "Yes, you can," he insisted. "Sarah, this appears larger than senior care deception. You're discussing unlawful imprisonment, perhaps even trials. If you get apprehended, I can't abandon her there," Sarah stated, tone resolute. She withheld mention of the journal. She withheld that she had procured it with her that evening. That night, she lingered extended once more overtly this occasion. Claimed she was assuming an additional duty. The personnel had acclimated to her presence. No one interrogated it. But as she traversed the caregiver's post, she overheard something that chilled her veins. "They're relocating her tonight," Mrs. Harrington remarked to another caregiver. "Corporate directives. To where? Doesn't specify." Sarah continued progressing, but she comprehended the implication. They were eliminating subject 13, whether by transfer or permanent silencing. Sarah was indifferent. She had to intervene. She awaited until shortly after 2 m.m. Max was prepared, positioned beside the western section entrance, as if he grasped the entirety. She utilized the procured key to access room 316, then proceeded through the metallic entrance Harold had revealed. This occasion, she carried a mobile identifier borrowed from the reception, and to her astonishment, it functioned. The identifier flashed affirmative access permitted. The entrance to 317 unlocked from within. The female remained present, but this occasion, her gaze tracked Sarah upon entry. "You returned?" she murmured. "I'm extracting you from here." Sarah released the bindings. The female offered no opposition. She maneuvered gradually, like an individual unaccustomed to ambulation for weeks. Max remained vigilant but silent. He positioned beside them as they stealthily advanced toward the passage. That's when the alerts activated, not conflagration alerts. Protection crimson illuminations pulsed along the overhead. A subdued siren resonated through the corridors. They sprinted. Sarah supported the female as capably as possible. Max vocalized twice cautionary vocalizations and dashed forward, surveying. Upon reaching the crisis stairway, Sarah nearly wept with alleviation until the entrance resisted opening. Secured, naturally. Then Max surged ahead, rumbling at the lift entrances. They were already parting. 2 gentlemen in ebony attire emerged, stun devices prepared. Sarah positioned in front of the female, shielding her. "Don't relocate," one of the gentlemen vocalized. Max surged. He didn't assault. He seized one of their limbs firmly and pulled, disbalancing the gentleman. The other attempted to elevate his stun device, but Max pivoted toward him, rumbling, gaze fixed. The diversion sufficed. Sarah activated the conflagration alert. Water dispensers activated throughout the establishment. Cries, disorder. The lift jammed. Illuminations oscillated. They possessed mere moments. She pulled the female back through the passage, then abruptly. A wonder, Harold was at the corridor's extremity, gesturing urgently toward a lateral exit Sarah had overlooked previously. "This direction," he shouted. They erupted through the lateral entrance and into the frigid night. Harold secured it behind them. Max lingered a moment extended, rumbling, defending, then dashed after them. They persisted fleeing until they attained Sarah's vehicle 2 streets distant. She operated the vehicle without utterance for 15 minutes, pulse still thundering in her torso. The female occupied the rear seating, mute, eyes sealed, reclining upon Max. Harold occupied the front, serene as always. "You knew," Sarah stated ultimately, her tone this entire duration. "I knew they'd arrive for her eventually," he remarked. "She wasn't intended to endure. What is she?" Harold pivoted his head gradually, regarding Sarah with the sort of stare only an individual who's witnessed excessive can provide. "She's evidence," he stated, "that they were engaging in more than tending to seniors. She's the final one." "Final what?" He refrained from response. That morning, Sarah contacted Jordan anew. "I have an individual requiring safeguarding," she remarked. "Sarah, what the hell did you execute?" "I preserved a existence." He assisted, organizing a conference with a confidential examiner linked to an informant safeguarding organization. The female subject 13 was transported to a secure site. No one knew her authentic designation yet. She scarcely articulated, but she was secure. Harold vanished shortly thereafter. Max, he never departed Sarah's flank again, and occasionally, deep into the night, Sarah would awaken to discover him positioned by the window, gazing into the obscurity as if he still detected something external, something unresolved. It had been 8 days since Sarah extracted Subject 13, now merely termed Lena, from room 317. 8 days of concealment. 8 days of anticipating any occurrence, but no updates arrived, no law enforcement. No probe, no journalists at the perimeter, nothing. The establishment persisted operational, routine as ever, as if none of it had transpired. Sarah occupied her modest lounge, navigating news streams on her mobile, while Max reclined coiled at her feet. One orb partially ajar, oracles flickering at every remote noise. Lena slumbered in the additional chamber. She hadn't uttered more than a handful of complete phrases since their arrival. She consumed in silence, rested in brief intervals, recoiled at boisterous sounds. But the odd aspect, she never once wept, not even during the nightmares. Sarah ultimately disrupted the quiet by contacting Jordan anew. "I don't comprehend," she remarked, striding the corridor just external the bedroom. "We liberated someone who wasn't even supposed to exist. Shouldn't the authorities be examining that location thoroughly by now?" "You're presuming anyone desires to investigate it," Jordan countered. "Establishments like Rose Hill are constructed with safeguards, legal, monetary, political. You tug one strand, and the entire structure might collapse. No one desires that. So we just feign nothing occurred? You performed the correct action, Sar, but if you're seeking justice, genuine justice, you might need to excavate further." There was a hesitation on the connection. "Look, I know a fellow. Used to be with governmental supervision, now he's independent. He's not inexpensive, but he's discreet, meticulous, and effective." Sarah exhaled. "Provide me his designation." She convened with the examiner 2 evenings thereafter. He was a lean gentleman in his late 50s with a tone resembling coarse stones and liquor, attired in a worn flight coat and a marital band that appeared untouched since the Reagan period. "Name's Harlan," he remarked, settling into the seating at the rear of a eatery just off the interstate. "You, Sarah?" She assented, pushing the journal across the surface. Harlan didn't unseal it promptly. He merely gazed at the exterior as if it could assault him. "Where'd you obtain this?" "Room 316 at Rose Hill." That prompted him to elevate his gaze. His eyes constricted. "You certain about that? I was present." He opened it, sheet by sheet, line by line, sporadically emitting a grunt, occasionally murmuring an oath under his breath. When he ultimately sealed it, he reclined. "This isn't senior care deception. This is covert operations material trial initiatives concealed beneath healthcare allocations. If even half of this is legitimate, someone expended considerable effort to vanish it, and now it's resurfacing." Sarah said quietly. Harlan rapped his digits on the surface. "There's a designation in here. Dr. Victor Hall. That resonate any familiarity?" Sarah shook her head. "Used to operate under the Defense Department, Biobehavioral Section. Disappeared from public documentation in 2012. My supposition, he went independent. Took his studies with him." Sarah's insides churned. "What sort of studies?" Harlan provided her a glance the variety individuals offer before uttering. "Something dreadful. The sort that reprograms distress recollection erasure, effective reconfiguration. Human trial cohorts, most of them overlooked by their kin-simple marks." Sarah inclined forward. "What do we execute?" We trace the funds. The initial advancement occurred 2 days thereafter. Harlan contacted her at 4:17 a.m. Get attired. Meet me at the documentation repository. Bring Max. She complied. They convened in the parking area of a governmental establishment that resembled a vehicle bureau wedded to a storage facility. Inside, Harlan displayed an emblem she was fairly certain was counterfeit but sufficient to grant entry. They sifted through containers of antiquated dossiers, the variety not yet converted to digital. Most were ordinary dining schedules, fiscal endorsements, personnel duty rosters from a decade prior, but then Harlan uncovered it, a relocation directive. February 13th, 2011. 5 residents transferred from establishment. 8B, now Rose Hill Western Section to Unidentified Containment Unit, authorization level. The designations were obscured, all except one, Lena L. She's been there that duration, Sarah murmured. Harlan assented, long enough for everyone to forget she was even vital. He continued turning until he halted on a duplicated identification emblem, Victor Hawley. Advisor, Rose Hill Specialized Endeavors. There was an address scrawled on the reverse in graphite. Looks like we're embarking on a journey, Harlan grumbled. They discovered Hale's designation linked to a facade enterprise registered from Delaware, channeling advisory compensations to an office in Santa Rosa. Upon arrival, the structure was eviscerated, denuded partitions, ripped flooring, vacant document holders. Whoever occupied it had evacuated rapidly, but Max appeared unconvinced. He persistently circled the distant extremity of the chamber, inhaling along the perimeter of the skirting boards. Then he vocalized. Sarah hastened over and discovered a slender ventilation cover marginally displaced. Within, crammed amid aged padding and a deceased rodent, was a sealed parchment envelope. Inside the envelope were images of Lena connected to apparatuses. Observed, monitored sheet after sheet of biological graphs, cerebral images, and substance experiment records. One memorandum captured Sarah's attention. Subject 13 has exhibited uncommon recollection resilience. Recommend perpetual imprisonment to avert violation. She gazed at the phrase, her palms quivering. She was the sole one who recollected. Harlan assented somberly. That's why they interred her. That evening, back at residence, Sarah displayed the images to Lena. The female refrained from speech for an extended period. She merely examined the sheets in silence, turning them gradually. Then, ultimately, she remarked, "My name's not Lena." Sarah blinked. "It's not. My name is Clara." She grinned scarcely. "I recollect now." In the days that ensued, Clara commenced to transform. She consumed more, rested longer, articulated incomplete dialogues. Fragments of her history resurfaced: guardians, education, a sibling named Ethan who used to recite graphic novels aloud at bedtime. She recollected being abducted, recollected the injections, the seclusion, but more than anything, she recollected a tone. "You're not authentic, Clara. You're what we created." She awoke, shrieking the initial occasion she uttered that aloud. Max was always present, leaping onto the cot, pressing his form against hers like a burdened barrier, and it functioned. She always settled. Harlan vanished not long after providing the final dossiers to a liaison he trusted in the media. The dossiers never reached publication. Instead, Rose Hill discreetly altered proprietorship. The online presence deactivated, and room 316, it was barricaded for genuine this occasion. Sarah maintained contact with Clara, who relocated to a safeguarded dwelling distant under a fresh persona. Max remained with Sarah, more aged now, maneuvering more gradually but still observant. One evening, as they occupied the veranda, Sarah regarded him and remarked, "You knew prior to anyone. You perceived what none of us desired to." He emitted a gentle whimper, tail striking once. She grinned. Heroes manifest in all forms, don't they? Max was decelerating. He still trailed Sarah from area to area like the faithful silhouette he'd always been, but his tempo was more purposeful now. Occasionally, when he reclined, he emitted a gentle groan, as if it demanded more exertion than previously. Sarah observed it most in the mornings. He used to welcome the day by dashing to the entrance the instant he detected avian chirps. Now he tarried on his canine mat a bit extended, elevating his skull first, then his form. He had merited the repose, but something in his gaze informed Sarah he wasn't concluded, yet not while the quiet persisted, not while Rose Hill endured. Clara, now residing under governmental safeguarding, had begun documenting everything. She filled journal after journal with splintered recollections, designations, countenances, depictions of extended pale corridors, a female with a verdant notepad, an odor resembling sanitizer and metal. One designation appeared more than any other, Victor Halle. Sarah encircled it every instance it surfaced. The authorities claimed Halle had been absent for years deceased, some asserted. Retired overseas, others maintained, but Sarah didn't believe in apparitions, and Max hadn't ceased striding at night. One tranquil Saturday, Sarah traveled 2 hours southward to visit Harlan. She hadn't encountered him since he disappeared after disseminating the dossiers. He'd gone untraceable, but Sarah knew where to locate him, an antiquated recreational vehicle site nestled behind an arid ravine path, the variety of location where no one requested surnames. He welcomed her with a container of dark brew in the identical brusque tone that somehow succeeded in sounding benevolent. "You're not finished, are you?" he remarked, extending the vessel. Sarah shook her head. "Neither is Max." He glanced downward at the aged canine, who had coiled at Sarah's footwear, but kept his gaze fastened on the dusty path behind them. Harlan lowered his tone. "I've been detecting murmurs about something termed Project Echo." Sarah looked up sharply. "What is it?" It was a conduct reset initiative off the records, financed through indirect avenues. Military, independent contractors, pharmaceutical. They utilized establishments like Rose Hill as camouflage serene residents, already overlooked, simple to experiment upon. "And Halle?" she inquired. Harlan exhaled. He was the designer. That evening, Sarah occupied her veranda. Max coiled beside her, observing the heavens darken from citrus to azure to ebony. She held Clara's most recent journal in her lap, turning through sheets filled with jotted terrors and fractured recollections. One segment halted her abruptly. I was in the seat again, the droning noise in the partition. I recollect Halle saying, "If it functions on her, it functions on anyone." And then the illuminations extinguished for a prolonged period. Sarah sealed the journal. What if Clara wasn't the sole one? What if Rose Hill still possessed more mysteries? The following day, Sarah returned to the retirement home not formally. She stationed her vehicle 3 streets distant, attired in a distribution outfit she borrowed from an acquaintance, hat low over her visage, notepad in grasp, a container labeled healthcare provisions in the rear. Max awaited in the adjacent seat, observing the structure like a guardian. She timed it impeccably midday meal when the reception was minimally occupied. She progressed as if she pertained. No one halted her. She advanced halfway down the eastern section before slipping into the antiquated provision pathway that used to extend behind rooms 310 to 320. She knew her destination, room 319, never referenced in dossiers, never illuminated from exterior, but always hushed. She pressed her oracle to the partition and became immobile. There it was, the droning, faint, low, perpetual, like an apparatus behind paneling. She extracted her mobile and captured it, just 30 seconds, sufficient evidence that something remained operational. Then she departed. Back at residence, Max inhaled her palms before she even articulated. "You were correct," she murmured, dropping beside him. "There's something still transpiring." She transmitted the capture to Harlan. He responded 5 minutes thereafter with a solitary line. "That's not merely power. That's frequency adjustment minefield technology." Sarah typed back, "What the hell is minefield?" Harlan called, "It's neural disruption." The military attempted it on trauma victims in the early 2000s. Halle developed a model supposed to inhibit distressing recollections. Didn't succeed. Too many adverse effects, fury, disconnection, visions. "They're still operating it?" Sarah asked. "They are, if they're desperate enough to keep the past interred." Sarah knew she couldn't handle this solo anymore. She went to see Jordan. He met her at a eatery midway between their residences, anxiously mixing his brew before she even settled. "You're going to get yourself terminated," he remarked without salutation. "I'm not walking away," Sarah remarked. "You saw the dossiers. You know what they executed?" "Yeah, and I also know how many individuals interred this thing layers, Sarah, bureaucratic cement. You excavate too far, and it's your designation they erase next. I'm not asking for permission. I'm asking for assistance." Jordan exhaled, rubbed his countenance, then inclined forward. "There's a session approaching," he murmured. "Unrelated matter, but one of the contractors linked to Halle is being summoned to attest. If we get a summons on record, even just mentioning Rose Hill, it forces a documentation trail." Sarah's pulse raced. How long? 10 days. 10 days felt like perpetuity. Sarah maintained a subdued presence, but every evening Max positioned at the window, observing, awaiting. Then, on day 6, it transpired. Sarah returned from the market to discover her front entrance slightly open. Max rumbled before they even traversed the veranda. Inside, the place had been disrupted not like a theft. No shattered panes, no absent screen, but the journals gone. Clara's journals, all of them except one, the most antiquated. The one from room 316. It was left on the kitchen surface, opened to a solitary sheet. A photograph was attached to it, a monochrome security capture still of Sarah and Max departing room 317. On the reverse of the image, inscribed in crimson pigment, "You're being observed. Walk away." Sarah didn't slumber that evening. She occupied the floor beside Max's mat, one palm on his fur, the other clutching the sheet. "This is how they intimidate people," she murmured. "Make it hushed, intimate. Make you question what's worth preserving." Max nuzzled her palm, and she knew she wasn't retreating. 2 days thereafter, Jordan called anew. "You're not going to believe this," he remarked. "Someone disseminated the Rose Hill dossiers to the Supervision Committee Public Health Division." Sarah's insides dropped. What? They're initiating an inquiry. Quiet for now, but it's authentic. We've got momentum. Her palms quivered. Finally. They'll want a witness, he added. Someone who observed it firsthand. Someone the public can relate to. Sarah looked down at Max. He never left my side, she remarked softly. Then bring him too. The evening before the session, Sarah went out onto the veranda again. The stars were visible, air crisp. Max coiled beside her in his usual spot. She reached into her coat compartment and pulled out the old identification emblem she defound weeks ago, Victor Hall. She hadn't uttered his designation aloud in days, but tonight she did. I don't know where you are, she remarked, gazing into the dark. But I know you're still out there, watching, hiding, waiting. She paused. And I'm not scared of you. Max let out a soft bark, like an agreement. She smiled. Tomorrow we speak. The session was held in a modest governmental structure just off the state capitol. No flashing lights, no swarm of reporters. Just a slow trickle of officials' aides and a few members of the public seated in rows of wooden chairs under buzzing fluorescent lights. Sarah sat at the front, one hand resting on Max's back. He was calm, composed, wearing a soft gray vest with the words Therapy Dog Retired K9 stitched on the side. He wasn't here for show. He was here as a witness too, in the only way he could be. The room smelled like stale coffee and cheap paper, but to Sarah it smelled like war. They called her name just before noon. She stood, walked to the microphone, and sat straight-backed, heart pounding. She had practiced this. She had read her statement a dozen times, but when she looked at the panel, 5 people in suits, one with tired eyes behind thick glasses, she didn't read from the page. She spoke from memory. My name is Sarah Hayes. I'm a registered nurse. I've worked at multiple care facilities across this state, but what I'm here to talk about, what happened at Rose Hill, was never about care. It was about control, and the people they hurt were the ones no one thought to ask about. She paused. Behind her, Max let out a soft exhale, like a grounding presence. Sarah continued, I'm talking about a patient known as Subject 13, a woman named Clara. She was held without registration, without consent, and used in illegal experiments involving neurosuppression, all under the supervision of a man named Victor Halle, whose name and funding trail connect directly to private contractors with military ties. Murmurs spread across the chamber. One of the board members looked up sharply. Sarah didn't stop. I found her. I got her out. And I'm here today because if I didn't speak, no one else would. But I'm not the hero in this story. She turned gently, placing her hand on Max's shoulder. He raised his head slightly, eyes scanning the room. He is. Max raised his head slightly, eyes scanning the room. He's the reason I knew something was wrong. He's the one who refused to walk past that locked door. He's the one who saw what we didn't want to. He never gave up, even when we did. He reminded me that truth doesn't bark softly. Sometimes it howls. After her statement, the questions came. Where's Clara now? What evidence do you have of Hale's direct involvement? Why didn't you go to the police earlier? Some questions were fair, some were barbed. Some clearly meant to cast doubt, but Sarah answered everyone. She referenced Harlan's files, Clara's medical scans, the facility's medication records, the biometric scanner hidden behind room 316. She showed them the photo of her and Max leaving room 317, the one left behind by whoever ransacked her home. "I was told to walk away," she said. "Instead, I walked in." The final witness that day was unexpected. A man in a gray suit entered the room, flanked by two plainclothes officers. Sarah's heart stopped. Victor Hale, older now, hair white, skin thin and drawn, but his eyes still sharp, still cold. The board chair leaned into the microphone. "Dr. Hale, you've been subpoenaed to appear under federal review. You may decline to answer, but we are authorized to continue proceedings in your absence." Hale didn't speak right away. Then he looked directly at Sarah. "You have no idea what we were doing," he said, his voice steady. "You think we were monsters. You don't understand the world we were trying to protect." Sarah stared back. "You weren't protecting the world. You were hiding from it." Hale shook his head, almost pitying. Clara was unstable. "You have no idea what she was capable of." Sarah stood. "I know what you were capable of, and I won't let you hide it anymore." The room was quiet when the hearing adjourned. Sarah stepped out into the late afternoon sun, Max beside her. The air felt different, lighter. Harlan met her outside. He didn't say much, just handed her a manila envelope. "Whistleblower protections are in place," he said. "The press will pick it up by morning. Clara's safe. You did good." Sarah nodded. "She deserves her life back. You all do." That night, Sarah drove back home with Max in the passenger seat, his head resting against the window, eyes half closed. The radio played soft folk music. The sun dipped below the trees. For the first time in months, she didn't feel like she was being followed. She made dinner nothing fancy. Grilled cheese, tomato soup. Max sat on his usual mat near the table. Halfway through eating, she looked at him and smiled. "Think we'll ever get used to normal again?" He wagged his tail once. 2 weeks later, the headlines broke. Illegal human experiments tied to Rose Hill facility. Retired nurse and canine. Expose hidden medical program. Where is Victor Hale? No one had seen him since the hearing, but the damage was done. The investigations widened. Other facilities were named. Other victims began to surface, some still alive, most still forgotten. Clara became the face of a quiet movement, anonymous interviews, blurred features, but her voice, stronger now, reached people. Sarah declined most interviews. She didn't want fame. She wanted closure. One evening, Clara called. "I remembered something else," she said. Sarah leaned against the kitchen counter, holding the phone with one hand, Max's bowl in the other. "What is it?" There was a pause. There was a phrase they used before every session. Hale would whisper it before the lights went on. Sarah waited. He'd say, "You'll forget who you are before the world remembers what we did." Sarah closed her eyes. "Not anymore," she said. "The world remembers now." 3 months passed. Sarah went back to nursing at a small community clinic, nothing secret, nothing hidden. Just people who needed care and someone to care enough to see them. Max came to work with her twice a week. The patients adored him. On his off days, he slept more, walked less, but he still barked when something didn't feel right. She trusted him more than any protocol. One evening, after locking up the clinic, Sarah sat with Max on the back steps. The sky above was orange and fading, the kind of summer twilight that made everything feel possible again. She scratched behind his ears. You saved lives, Max, more than you'll ever know." He leaned into her hand, a soft huff of contentment. "Funny," she whispered, "how the world thought you were retired. But you never really stopped working, did you?" She looked up at the stars. Some heroes wear uniforms, others wear fur. "Thank you so much for following this story through every twist, secret, and howl in the night. It's been an emotional journey and a reminder that truth doesn't always roar. Sometimes it just barks and waits for someone to listen. Now, I want to hear from you. What would you have done if Max barked at a locked door and no one else believed him? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and if you believe in stories that celebrate animal heroes, justice, and the people who refuse to look away, please share this one with someone who needs it. From all of us at Heroes for Animals, thank you.